Good Friday and getting ready for the weekend. Let me just see if I am live here. Let's see. Twitter's been a little weird lately with this. Um, yeah, so I am live. I'm going to just tweet out the link. Um, Give me one sec here as I just tweet this out. Okay. Okay. Okay, sorry about this. Just tweeting out the link. Here we go. Okay, we're good. Yeah, how's everyone doing? We have a great show today, as always. So much to get to, and I can't wait to get into it. Obviously, baseball is back, sort of, kind of. It's not fully back, as everyone knows. It was the first spring training game. Obviously, today took place in Florida, and the Yankees took the L to the Baltimore Orioles, who, I mean, they were playing. Pete Alonso was playing into like the sixth inning of that game. It was like, calm down. It's all right. You guys won a game in February. Congratulations. But yeah. So spring training is underway. We're gonna talk about that. We're gonna get into Judge Aaron Judge's comments about the front office, basically kind of questioning the offseason and some of the thoughts that he had related to that. So we will get into that as well. And then we'll talk about some Yankees to watch this spring training, some players that I think have the most to gain this spring. Obviously, spring training can be a drag, as we all know, but some guys that I think have a lot to gain this spring. And then we'll get into the Giants a little bit. We'll talk about some of the players that I think can improve the most under John Harbaugh. And we will close the show talking about Steve Cohen, who had some interesting comments this week at Mets spring training and Mets camp, speaking about the fact that the Mets will never have a captain. And I really want to dive into that and kind of give you some of my full thoughts there. Um, so let's start with Aaron Judge. And Judge, obviously, if you didn't see it this week, he gave his first press conference of spring where basically he spoke about a number of things relating to the upcoming season. And of course, one of the big topics was the inactivity of the Yankees during the start of the offseason, where you got to the middle of January and the only move the Yankees had really made was bringing back Trent Grisham on the qualifying offer. And obviously, as we know, the later part of January and into February, the Yankees were able to make multiple different moves, including bringing back their biggest free agent, Cody Bellinger, and also bringing back not Trent Grisham, sorry, bringing back Paul Goldschmidt, which was obviously a big move that the Yankees made to close out their offseason. So going to try to play Judge's comments here, and we will listen to that, and then I'll kind of come back and react. So let me see here what I can do. Okay, so I'm gonna play Judge's comments now.
Obviously with Cody, going into January, not knowing whether he was going to be back or not, and how important he is to this team.
It was brutal. I'm like, I see a lot of free agents out there. I see a lot of guys that, like the Bellingers, the Grishams, the Goldschmidts. Like, yeah, let's sign these guys right now and then start adding more pieces. Because I'm seeing other teams around the league get better. They're making trades. They're signing big prospects or big players, and we're sitting there for a while. Kind of making smaller moves, but it was tough there in the beginning. But I think once we solidify getting Bellinger back. We got Trent being our center fielder, be our leadoff guy for another year. And then you had a guy like Goldie, some of the back end, bullpen pieces that we've been doing. I think we're in a good spot. But the early on, it was pretty tough to watch. So I'm like, man, we're the New York Yankees. Let's go out there and get the right people, get the right pieces to go out there and finish this thing off, because we got a special group of players here. We got a good core, a good young core. So yeah, it was frustrating, but I think we're right where we need to be.
Did you express any of that to them?
Yeah, oh yeah. But they took care of business. I've voiced my opinion about a couple of guys, and Bellinger being one of the guys that he just adds a dynamic to this team that we've been missing for quite a few years. So
So that was Aaron Judge, of course, in his own words. Let me see what I'm doing here. Okay, I should be back now. I think I'm back. Um, yeah. So let me just see here. Uh, okay, let me see. Let's see. Just trying to get my bearings here. Oh no. Okay. Okay. I think I'll just continue this way. Um, so basically, in his own words, there. Um, sorry, let me just see if I just see how this looks right now. Hold on one second. Let me just see something. Yeah, I'm only half screen. Uh, okay, let's see. If I full screen view, let's see how this looks now. Let's see. If I full screen view, let's see how this looks now. Okay, it's still only half the screen. Um, Let me see how to. Recording. Uh, let's see. Can't figure out this full this sharing screen thing. Uh, let's see. Okay, got it back. Sorry about that, guys. um, so in his own words, Aaron Judge called out the Yankees, plain and simple. And Aaron Judge has the Derek Jeter thing going, where he's not going to be this. He's not going to come out and basically say Brian Cashman sucks or the front office sucks or there's you know they got to be doing more. I mean, he's going to be a diplomatic guy. We understand that Aaron Judge, the captain of the Yankees, he's been this way his whole career. He's a very diplomatic player. He's a very diplomatic person. But he could have very easily in that interview, in that press conference, said, "Hey, listen, I'm really a big fan of what we did this offseason. I love bringing back Cody, love getting Trent Grisham back to be our center fielder. We brought back Goldie at the end of the offseason. I was a big fan of what we did." And he could have went on his merry way. But instead, Aaron Judge outwardly called out the organization. He outwardly said, in those first 45 seconds there, he said, "Yeah, it was brutal. Yeah, I was sitting around like, why haven't we made any moves? Why haven't we brought back Bellinger? Why haven't we brought back, Goldschmidt? Why haven't we added," as he mentioned there? A very important piece of that is that he said, add to what they've already done. Something that the Yankees were unable to do this offseason as they basically just ran back the same team. So I think this is really interesting. Aaron Judge has every right to be mad. Over the last 4 years, Aaron Judge has been an MVP 3 of the last 4 seasons. He is on a run over the last 4 years where he has been he is on a 4-year run where he's been arguably one of the best players in the history of baseball over the last 4 years. There are not many players in the history of the game who have had a 4-year run like Aaron Judge has had. And he has nothing to show for it. No championships. Only been to 1 World Series and lost in 5 games when he got there. So he has every right to call out the front office. And he has every right to be pissed that the Yankees have not put a team around Aaron Judge to allow them to reach that ultimate goal. And obviously before last postseason, I was one of the most critical people of Aaron Judge. I was like, listen, guys, Aaron Judge has got to take some blame here. Been, a completely different player in the postseason than he is for the entire 162. And for a while there, for multiple years, he was a flat-out bad postseason player, and I was the first to admit it. But how do you get on Aaron Judge for last postseason? Aaron Judge last postseason, the guy's got to be sitting here saying, I went out there last postseason, and I hit 500 over the wild card series against the Red Sox and the divisional series against the Toronto Blue Jays. I hit 500, and I was an absolute beast in those series, and it was nothing to show for it. So I think Aaron Judge is a little bit pissed off. And I think that's what he's voicing there. Now, I do want to mention, and you've seen this in the history of the game, in all sports, some of the best players in the history of sports were not cut out to be executives and were not cut out to be owners. You look at Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan's the greatest basketball player in the history of the NBA. He was a terrible owner of the Charlotte Hornets. You look at Derek Jeter. Derek Jeter, for as long as I live, is going to be my favorite athlete. Derek Jeter was not a good executive with the Miami Marlins. He did a bad job. Great players should not be GMs. That is the reality. And we have seen this over the course of Aaron Judge's career as he's gotten more influence. Really, after he signed that mega contract extension back in 2023, the 9-year, $360 million extension that we're in the middle of now, Judge has had a lot of power. And the guys Judge has lobbied for haven't exactly panned out. He was a huge proponent in 2024 bringing in Alex Verdugo. Alex Verdugo not only was one of the weakest links on a Yankee team that did make the World Series, but he was lobbying for a guy in Alex Verdugo who completely blocked Jason Dominguez that whole season, and I think really hurt his development. And Judge was pounding the table for Alex Verdugo. He pounded the table as well in 2024 and 2025 when DJ LeMahieu started to decline. Judge, there are rumors out there that Judge was a big proponent of why it took the Yankees so long to cut bait with DJ and why they kept going back to that well before they eventually DFA'd him. Great players should not be GMs. And we've seen with Aaron Judge, for as great of a player he is, and he's one of the best players of a generation, he should not be a general manager. He should not be making decisions on the baseball personnel that the Yankees bring in. And we have seen one too many times Judge make decisions for the Yankees that have ended up hurting them in the long haul. So I understand what Aaron Judge is saying, and I get that Aaron Judge is pissed off, and he has a right to be. But we can't ignore the fact that when Judge has made GM decisions over the past 3 or 4 years, they haven't really turned out well. And I think he should just stick to playing, and the front office should stick to picking the players. That's what I want to see going forward. But that was the Aaron Judge stuff. So, listen, I definitely think it was interesting that Judge kind of, voiced his opinion there. It's not something that he normally does, and I found it interesting, so I wanted to go through it. Let's get into some guys to watch this spring. So 3 Yankees to watch this spring training. Number 1 is Carlos LaGrange. Excuse me. Got the pronunciation wrong. I know I would do that. Number 1 is Carlos LaGrange. LaGrange is a guy who I think has a chance to impact the Yankees down the stretch of the 2026 season. And the role I foresee him potentially being in is a bullpen role. If you look at the Yankee bullpen right now, they do not have, in my opinion, a ton of really great high-leverage guys. Of course, we know David Bednar. Of course, they have Camilo Doval, and they have Fernando Cruz. But the reality with the Yankees is they do not have a ton of flamethrowers in the back end, guys that you can kind of give a two to, kind of like a multi-inning role type reliever who could come in a playoff scenario, a late pennant race scenario, and dominate. And LeGrahe is a really impressive prospect. I mean, he was clocked the other day throwing 103 miles an hour, striking out Aaron Judge. Really exciting stuff. And you look at his numbers last year in Double-A, extremely impressive. 12 strikeouts per nine, 3.22 ERA in Double-A last year. Now, he walks way too many batters. But if he can improve his control, this is a guy who, in my opinion, can impact the Yankees in a bullpen role in 2026. And to me, if he can go out here in this spring training and show and prove that he belongs and prove that he can harness some of that, if he can improve on some of those control issues. To me, the Yankees could be looking at a guy, obviously down the road, you hope he can be a starter. But for 2026, for right now, for the Yankees trying to compete for a championship this year, to me, his best usage could be as that high leverage reliever in the bullpen. So I would love to see that, and I think LeGrahe has a lot of things to prove and can make a lot of hay this spring. The second guy is Spencer Jones. And I haven't given up on Spencer Jones. I know that might be an unpopular opinion. Spencer Jones last year in the minor leagues hit 35 home runs and had a 920 OPS. That's the positive. That's the good. The bad, he had a 36% strikeout rate. And that strikeout rate's always going to be there for Spencer Jones. But here's my thought with Jones. If he goes out and has a huge spring, let's say he's just tearing the cover off the ball this spring, going off. Could he be in play if Trent Grisham were to suffer an injury during the season? Obviously, we understand that Spencer Jones, unless there's an act of God, has no chance of breaking camp with the Yankees. No debate for me. My question, though, is if Trent Grisham goes down this year, the Yankees obviously love Cody Bellinger's defense in left field. It's one of their key pillars of their team. They say, listen, we found the guy in Bellinger who can finally, after so many years after Brett Gardner of not having a left fielder, we finally found a guy who can handle that position defensively at Yankee Stadium. If Grisham were to go down and then the Yankees have a huge hole in center field, wouldn't it be better than maybe putting Dominguez in center, let's say, or Dominguez in left and Bellinger in center? Wouldn't you maybe be better off just keeping everything the same and Spencer Jones, who is a natural center fielder, as we know, slides in for Trent Grisham and plays for a month or 6 weeks, for however long Grisham's out? And I hope Grisham obviously doesn't get hurt. I'm just bringing up the point that if Trent Grisham were to go down, can Spencer Jones this spring put himself in a category to where he gives the Yankees something to think about if Grish goes down during the season? That's my thought there. The third guy is Luis Gil. And this, I think, is a little bit of a surprise to some people because a lot of people would say, well, Luis Gil is an established pitcher. He won Rookie of the Year a couple of years ago. What does he have to prove? I need to see, as a fan, Luis Gil get back to the player he was in 2024 when he won Rookie of the Year. His numbers really fell off from 2024 to 2025. And I know what you're thinking. Well, his ERA went down. Yes, his ERA went from about 3.5 to, I think, 3.2 last year. Or 3.3, something along those lines. However, his peripheral numbers in 2024 versus 2025 were night and day. As an example, his strikeouts per nine, his Ks per nine, went from 10.1 to 6.5. They almost got cut in half. This was a guy who had the lat injury last year and obviously missed a ton of time. When he returned, he was not missing any bats, which was completely different than the Luis Gil we saw in 2024 when he won Rookie of the Year. And for me, I need to see a guy this spring. I'm not saying that performance is the end-all be-all in spring training. Trust me, it's not. But we need to see a guy who's able to go out there and miss bats again. We need to see a guy that's able to go out there and dominate again and get strikeouts again. And to me, that was not what we saw last year. We saw a completely different pitcher than the one that we saw when he won Rookie of the Year in 2024. So those are the three guys I think that have the most to gain this spring training for the Yankees. Carlos LeGrahe, Spencer Jones, and Luis Gil. Those are the three guys that I think have the most to gain this spring. Pivoting to the Giants now. And obviously there's a ton to get into with the Giants. We know that they're going to be embarking on free agency soon. I saw earlier that John Harbaugh and GM Joe Shane are going to be speaking at the scouting combine, I believe on Tuesday. So, I mean, the NFL, just the calendar never stops in the National Football League. And the combine's always a great week, and that's happening later next week. And then obviously about a week or two after that, we get into free agency. And before we know it, the draft will be here. So there's always a ton to talk about with the Giants. What I wanted to get into today, and I was thinking about this, one thing that you're hoping as a Giant fan is that John Harbaugh, not only does he bring a culture, not only does John Harbaugh bring kind of this workman-like mentality to the head coaching position in the NFL, you want John Harbaugh to bring a player development program to where players on the Giants year over year are getting substantially better. And we know this as Giant fans. There was a coaching problem here. Particularly on the defensive side of the ball, we saw guys take massive steps backward. Young players that should have been improving, that should have been getting better. We saw guys taking steps backwards, and that's not what you want to see out of young players. And to me, here are three I wanted to go through today. Three under-the-radar guys that I think can improve the most under John Harbaugh. Number one is Drew Phillips, the third-round pick out of Kentucky in the 2024 draft. He's entering his third year. Phillips is a really weird case to me. Drew Phillips is one of the shortest tacklers on the team. Drew Phillips is probably the best tackler on the Giants. I believe last year he was second on the team in tackles for loss. Now, that might say more about the rest of the team than it does about Drew Phillips, but this is one of the best tacklers on the defense. He is a short tackler, and that is a huge part of being a slot corner. He can help in the run game, all those things. In his rookie year in 2024, he was one of 8 secondary players, with a run and pass PFF grade of over 75. He was one of 8 players with a run stopping grade and a pass coverage grade of over 75 in his rookie year in 2024. And then last year he took a step back. And was that coaching? I think a big part of it might have been. And I think the reality for the Giants is when you look at the staff that John Harbaugh brought in, particularly on defense, Denard Wilson has the background. Denard Wilson, who's the defensive coordinator, has the background as a secondary coach in 2 very successful locations, Baltimore under John Harbaugh and Philadelphia. He was the secondary coach of that team the year they made the Super Bowl. They bring in Donald DeLessio, the passing game coordinator for the Giants now. He has a track record in Baltimore under Harbaugh and also in Kansas City under Andy Reid. 2 very successful locations. And then you bring in Addison Lynch, who was the secondary coach for the Giants from the Denver Broncos. Broncos had one of the best secondaries in the NFL last year. To me, the Giants have brought in a defensive coaching staff that can really help a player like Drew Phillips, who clearly has talent. He needs to cut down on his penalties. He was one of the most penalized defensive backs in the league last year. But if he can cut down on his penalties and get a little better in coverage, in my opinion, he could be one of the better slot corners in the NFL. I truly believe that about Drew. And I think that Harbaugh, who is obviously a safety when he was a player, he has a background in the secondary, and the defensive staff he brought in, with all these dudes, Denard Wilson, DeLessio, and Addison Lynch, who are all really, really, I think, risers in the industry and very good coaches in terms of the secondary. In my opinion, they can really get the best out of Drew Phillips. So that's number one. Number 2 on the list is Theo Johnson. Now, Theo Johnson is a guy who has gotten under the skin of a lot of Giants fans because he has a ton of drop passes, and that's a huge problem for Theo Johnson. He led the NFL in drop passes amongst tight ends in 2025 with 10 drops. Can't have it. Cannot have those drops going forward. But the reality with John Harbaugh, there's a couple realities, though, with Theo Johnson. The first is Jackson Dart loved him as a target. Loved him. And the reason Jackson Dart loved him is because he loves big targets. We understand this. Jackson Dart loves throwing to tight ends. Jackson Dart loves throwing to big targets. That's exactly what Theo Johnson is. He can go up in the red zone. He can catch touchdowns in the red zone. He can go up and make contested catches. Those are things that he needs to improve on. So if he is the lead tight end next year, Jackson Dart is clearly going to feature him in his target distribution. The second piece, and maybe the most important piece, is look at the offensive staff along with John Harbaugh. Matt Nagy, who's the offensive coordinator, has an extensive background in Kansas City. He coached Travis Kelce, a team and an offense that featured the tight end. You look at Baltimore. Baltimore, in John Harbaugh's time there, not only drafted tight ends, but they featured them in their offense. Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, Charlie Kohler, all the guys that they went out and drafted in that secondary, all the guys that they went out and drafted in that tight end room, they featured. They featured Isaiah Likely. They featured Mark Andrews in their offense. And to me, that is the type of offense with the influence of Nagy and Harbaugh that we are going to be seeing this upcoming season for the Giants. And in my opinion, it is a perfect opportunity for Theo Johnson to take another step. And especially if the Giants do not go out and get a Kyle Pitts or get an Isaiah Likely in free agency, Theo, in my opinion, has a huge opportunity. Now, will he take it? I have no idea. He might not take it. He might, struggle and ultimately not become the player that we want him to be. But in my opinion, John Harbaugh is going to look to get the most out of Theo Johnson. And I believe that there's a chance that Theo can really improve. And then the third player is Tyler Nubin. Tyler Nubin's an interesting one. Report came out from Ryan Dunleavy. Nubin's a player that you might see a position change at. You might see the Giants use him as kind of like a hybrid linebacker versus a safety. Obviously, he has some speed issues that have prevented him from being a good safety at the NFL level. Here's the thing with Tyler Nubin. Tyler Nubin has some traits that I think John Harbaugh is going to like. The track record of Nubin coming from the days of the University of Minnesota, he was a very heady player, and he was a captain of the defense. A leader, and a guy who mentally was very sharp. Can John Harbaugh get the most out of Tyler Nubin? Tyler Nubin, another player, similar to Phillips. As a rookie, he had 98 tackles, and he missed like 5 games. And he had almost 100 tackles. So there's obviously talent there. And he was a high second-round pick. He was projected to be one of the first tight ends off the board. Can Tyler Nubin fit John Harbaugh's program? A program that's going to obviously, cater to players that are smart, to players that know where they want to be, to players that want to be in the right spot. There's obviously some talent issues with Nubin, but can the Giants get the most out of him? I believe that with Nubin and Phillips specifically, that there is more in the tank that the Giants can potentially get out of them. And I think that they're both players. Phillips, I think, clearly, a guy that's going to be a starter in the NFL. Nubin is a guy that I won't give up on just yet. There was too good of a draft profile, and he had too solid of a year one for me to completely abandon Tyler Nubin. And again, Harbaugh with the safety background, Nubin with the safety background. I am interested in Nubin being a safety. I'm interested to see, can John Harbaugh get the most out of Tyler Nubin? So those are the 3 Giants that I really think can those are the 3 Giants that I really think can improve the most under John Harbaugh's leadership. Final thing, and then we'll get out of here. So Steve Cohen this week, the owner of the New York Mets, made some very interesting comments in which he, very interesting because he was basically asked, about the Mets locker room stuff. There was obviously the reports that came out over the offseason that there were some issues in the locker room, and a report, and basically one of the reporters down there in Florida asked Steve, are you going to name a captain? Like, what's the thought process with going forward with naming a captain? And he basically said, there's never going to be a captain in my time as the owner of the Mets. And I will play that clip for you now to show you what Steve said. So let's try to get that up. Okay, so here is Steve Cohen discussing if there will ever be a captain in his time owning the Mets.
Is there any movement to name a team captain, or is that something you don't think is necessary?
As long as I'm owning the team, there will never be a team captain.
Really?
Okay, that was my decision. My view is the locker room is unique, and let the locker room sort it out year in, year out. And so,
So you're not saying that there'll never be one?
no, there'll never be a captain.
Oh, there'll never be a captain.
There'll never be a captain.
When did you make that decision?
I've felt that way all along.
Really?
Yeah.
Very interesting comments from Steve Cohen. And it makes me think that there is something wrong in that Mets locker room. There's just something wrong in that Mets locker room. Because for Steve Cohen to come out and basically say there's never going to be a captain. I mean, Steve Cohen could own the Mets for the next 30 years. Never going to be a captain. Now, something very funny about naming captains and all these things is I remember listening to something from Mike and the Mad Dog when Jeter was named captain. Obviously, Derek Jeter was named captain in 2003 in Cincinnati before a game against the Reds. He was named captain. Might have been 2004. I'm pretty sure it was 2003, but it might have been. It was one of those 2 years. And there's a hysterical Mike and the Mad Dog kind of segment that they did on the radio. You should go listen to it if you haven't, where they're yelling at each other about Jeter being named captain, and Mad Dog's like, Mad Dog's like, nobody cares that he's named captain. Who cares? And Princess is like, okay, dog. I mean, listen, I thought he was the captain since he's been here. He's been the captain since he's been here, dog. Okay, and they were kind of going back and forth. I agree that overall, being named a captain is not the end all be all. You don't have to name a captain to have leadership on your team. But we have to admit that this is a little bit strange. The Francisco Lindor Mets tenure was trending towards him being the captain, right? After the 2024 season, in which the Mets had this great year, they obviously went to the National League Championship Series. They lost to the Dodgers, who were the eventual World Series champ. They had a great year. Lindor, it was basically like, it seemed like it was a foregone conclusion that Francisco Lindor was going to be the Mets captain. And all of a sudden, 1 year later, Juan Soto shows up. There's the reports in the offseason that just passed that there was issues in the locker room. They had political issues. They couldn't get along. They don't have a great relationship. All those reports come out, and then Steve Cohen in spring training is like, they'll never be a captain. To me, that's a little bizarre. And I'm wondering if there are still problems in that Mets locker room. And we will never know fully what is going on inside that clubhouse. But it is very strange that Francisco Lindor went from this remarkable, all-time leader, he's going to be the captain, just a matter of time, to now, not only is he not going to be named the captain, but there will never be a captain. In my opinion, there's still trouble in the Mets locker room. And it will be interesting to see how Carlos Mendoza and the leaders of that team handle it. Because for Steve Cohen to come out and say that is bizarre. It's bizarre. One more thing before we go. And, I've been trying to do this thing where, I know every time I've spoken, I know they won the NBA Cup, and I spoke well about the Knicks at that point. But, every time I talk about the Knicks, I feel like I'm ranting, and I feel like I'm ranting in a negative way. But that's just kind of been this season, and the Knicks go out there last night against the Detroit Pistons, and they get absolutely punked. Now, again, Detroit, mind you, did not have two of their main guys in Isaiah Stewart and Jalen Durham because they got suspended for the melee against the Charlotte Hornets a couple weeks ago. So those guys were suspended out. The Knicks, for the first time all season against the Pistons, were basically at full strength. They didn't have Deuce McBride, but they had OG Anunoby, they had Karl Anthony Towns. They had everybody there. And they basically got wired and got absolutely spanked in the game on their home floor. Now, something that everyone is saying on the radio today, on TV shows. Well, look at the Knicks in 2020. Last year, look at the Knicks. They got dominated all year by the Boston Celtics in the regular season, and they beat them in the playoffs. So the correlation is the Knicks can get dominated all year by Detroit like they have and beat them in the playoffs. There's a couple issues with that. The first issue is the Knicks in the series against the Celtics needed 2 20-point comebacks and a Jason Tatum torn Achilles to beat them. I'm not taking anything away from the Knicks. They deserve to win that series. But the reality is, and I'm saying this as a Knicks fan, the reality is they got breaks in that series to win it. Clearly. And the other point that I think needs to be mentioned, the Boston Celtics last year were a championship-winning team who had one of the historic regular seasons really in the history of the NBA last year. They were coming off winning a championship, and they were one of the best teams entering the year. Everybody had them as this is a juggernaut team. No one could beat the Celtics. That was the refrain the whole year. The Knicks this year are getting punked by a Pistons team that has made significantly fewer big moves than the Knicks. They've never made an all-in move. I mean, this offseason, they signed Duncan Robinson. Like, they haven't made an all-in move whatsoever. The Knicks have made like 3 all-in moves. Right? You trade for OG Anunoby, you trade 5-6 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges, no one can keep count, and then you trade for Karl Anthony Towns. And yet, so the point I'm trying to make is you should be in a much better position than the Pistons. You should not be a team that is below their level. Like it wasn't acceptable, but it was understandable to be below the level of that Celtics team last year. To be getting humiliated by a Pistons team who has not even won a playoff series in their team's existence, this group, is way more embarrassing than what happened to last year's Knicks. And to compare the two, I think is a bit silly. Because no one last year, the whole year, no one was picking the Knicks to win the East. Preseason, midseason, playoffs, no one did. It was the Celtics are too good and the Cavs are too good. But this year it was different. Everybody had the Knicks winning the East at the beginning of the season. Everybody. And to go out and get dominated like they have by this Detroit Pistons team is completely unacceptable. Completely. So that's the show for today. Thank you all for tuning in. Sorry with the shared screen issue. I apologize for that. I got it better on the Steve Cohen thing. I will definitely continue to improve as I do more shows. So I apologize for that, but I'm trying to get better and learn the tricks of the trade here. Anyway, if you're watching on YouTube, please like the video. Please subscribe. It really helps us out and helps the video out. We'll be back next week for another stream, and we'll talk some more about what's going on in New York sports. Until then, have a great weekend,